Alright, so we're back with another video, and now that we have learned how we can interact with our database using ORM Lite, and we also know how we can use the command executor interface to manage our commands a lot more cleaner in our code, let's go ahead and put all of our knowledge together and create a custom sethome command as well as a home command. And basically the way that this will work is we're going to go ahead and use the sethome command. It's going to save our coordinates to the database, and then whenever we use /home, it will teleport us to that location. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to, of course, modify our user entity. Okay, so basically we need to save the user's coordinates to the database. Okay, now how do we do that? Well, you might think, well, can't we just create a field for each coordinate? Like we can create a field for x, one for y, and one for z, right? Well, yes, you can do that inside the user class, but we're not going to define individual fields for this class. Instead, what we'll do is we'll create a one-to-one relationship between the user and another database table, and we'll call that database table user home. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll first create a new class called user home. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll need to set this up so that it can actually map to an actual database table. Okay, now one thing that I do want to mention is that in order for us to use one-to-one relationships using ORM Lite, we actually need to use the Java Persistence API. And in order to use the API, we need to, of course, download the dependencies. So how do we get the correct Java Persistence API package? Well, I'll show you. So I'll leave a link in the description, but basically, if you just go on the Maven repository website, and if you search for JavaX Persistence API, so you can just also just type in JavaX Persistence like this, and then this one over here, version 2.2. Okay, this will get you the Java Persistence API. And basically, this API allows you to use a bunch of different annotations that are not part of ORM Lite by default, but you can use this. Okay, and we're going to use this in order for us to actually set up one-to-one relationships. So I'll copy this. I'll paste it inside my pom.xml. And then we'll go ahead and load up our Maven changes. So we'll click that button on the top right. And then underneath external libraries, we should be able to see that package right over here installed. Okay, so now what we can do is instead of using the database table annotation, right, we're going to use the entity annotation instead, like this. And then we'll set the name of this to be user home, like that. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set up our fields. So we'll literally do private. First, well, let's set up the primary key. So private int ID, like that. Okay, and then we can use the database field annotation. So this comes from ORM Lite. If you're familiar with Java Persistence API, you could also use those annotations as well if you need. But we'll just do it like this. Okay, database field, and then we'll just set generated ID, set that to true, and then we're done with that. And then for our fields, we'll just need a field for each coordinate, so x, y, and z. So we'll do private double x, right, because coordinates are floats. So we'll use the double data type, private double y, and then private double z, like this. Okay, and then we'll use the database field property, or annotation, sorry, each one, like that. Okay, now we will need the no-arg constructor, of course, so public user home, like that. And I'll also set up another constructor where it'll take in all three coordinates, so x, double y, double z, and we'll just do this dot x equals x, this dot y equals y, this dot z equals z. So this will just grab all of this, will just like take all of the coordinates and just set it immediately. So that way we don't have to manually call set x, set y, and set z, which we do need to get the getters and setters. So we'll generate that through IntelliJ. So just go to code, generate, select getter and setter, and then just generate. We'll do one for, we'll do it for all four. Okay, and I'll just delete the setID method because we don't want to have that method. Because remember, our database will take care of creating the auto-generated ID. Okay, everything else is fine. Okay, so that should be good to go. We can also create an additional method ourselves. So I'll create one called public void set coordinates. And this will literally just be a method that will take in x, y, and z, whoops, as arguments, and then we'll literally do the same thing that we're doing for the constructor. So we'll have the constructor, we'll create a constructor that can actually set the coordinates, and we'll also create an additional method that we can call to update the coordinates or set the coordinates if we need to. Okay, so this should be good to go. Let's go ahead and close this out. We will actually need to do one more thing though, and I'll show you that in a second. But let's go to the user entity now, and we need to change this from database table to entity. So add entity, and then we'll set the name to users like this. Okay, and then what we will do is we'll create another field, and that field will be of type user home, and then we'll name the field home. And then for the annotation, we want to use the 1-to-1 annotation. So remember, this comes from JavaX persistence. Okay, so make sure you import that up top there. And then we're going to go ahead and also use the join column annotation as well. So this will actually join the columns together. So you'll have the actual user homes. You'll actually have an additional column in the users table that will be the primary key of the user home record, okay, which will allow you to query that data very easily. So we'll pass in the name, and we'll call this home ID. Actually, sorry, this should be double quotes home ID, and that should be fine. And then we'll also set up a getter and setter as well. So let's auto-generate that. Getter and setter for home. So we have public user home, get home, public void set home right over here. Perfect. All right, so we then need to go back to user home, and then we'll go ahead and set up another 1-to-1 annotation over here. And then we need to use the map by property, and then we'll just set that to users, which is the name of the table. And then the data type of this will be private user, like that. So you need to do it. You need to basically map both classes, right? Because it's both 1-to-1. Okay, and all 1-to-1 relationship means is that one record in a database table is associated with exactly another record in another table. And that makes sense because user is only going to be associated with one user home record and not multiple. Of course, you can have multiple. It depends on how you want to implement this, but for our implementation, for this implementation, we'll just do 1-to-1 relationship. Okay, so we're pretty much done with all of this. The next thing that we need to do is initialize all of our tables. So what we'll do is we'll actually just drop the database table. So drop users or drop table users. Well, actually, I need to select the database. So I'll just type use Minecraft space server DB. And I think I actually already dropped all the tables already. You can see that it's an empty set. But you can just do drop table users, and then it'll drop it for you. Okay? You can also manually update everything yourself, but that would take a lot of time. So just dropping it would be okay, especially if you're just developing it and you're not making too many changes at the moment. But of course, when you are in production, you definitely don't want to drop your database because you'll lose all your data. But let's go ahead and continue. So we'll definitely need a user home DAO, okay? But what we'll do is this. I think we won't need to. We don't even need to get that right now. What I'll do is I'll reference table utils, create table if not exists, pass in connection source, and then we'll go ahead and reference user home. So we'll have to import that up top here, and then dot class. So the same thing that we're doing for the user, we're doing it for user home. So this should create both the user and the user home table. So what we'll do is we'll reload our plugin. No errors were thrown. That is good. And you'll see that it should have created that users table. Actually, wait, sorry. I forgot to package our plugin. Sorry about that. Let's package everything. Okay, good. Now let's reload. So you can see that it should have created the user home table. Good. No errors were thrown. Let's go ahead and use the show tables statement. And you can see that we have users and user home. If you were to describe the schema of these tables, okay, there we go. So the user home has this user ID field over here. Okay, that will basically get you the user ID. And I think that should be it. So let me just double check everything, make sure everything is okay. This is good. And this seems to be good as well. So I think, yeah, I think this is fine. Perfect, perfect. Okay. So now that we have our database tables, okay, now what do we need to do next? Well, next thing that we need to do is we need to actually create the user home record in the database. Okay, so right now we obviously don't have any data at all in our database because we just create those tables. But we know that the users record will always exist, right? Whenever, as long as there's users join the server, that record will always exist. So let me show you. Let's rejoin the server. Okay, no errors were thrown. Let's see what's going on here. Well, actually, an error was thrown, and the reason why is because I think it has something to do with the home ID or like the default home value, because inside our event listener, it is expecting a value for home. I think so. I think maybe that's probably the reason why it is throwing that error, as you can see over here. So let me actually do this real quick. Okay, so I managed to figure out what the issue was. So I looked at my database table, and before I did find it weird that it did not have that home ID field for the users table, even though it should have had it. So what I did was I actually just dropped the users table, and I also dropped the user home table, and I just let the plugin recreate the tables again. And now you can see that the users table does in fact have that home ID field. So we shouldn't have any issues when we're trying to create the user brand new to the server. So right now you'll see that I have a user record, but let me just drop all the tables so we can start fresh. Let me package my code again. So we didn't change anything inside the event listener class at all. Okay. Inside user class, we did not change anything. And inside the user home class, we didn't change anything as well. So we package the code. Let's reload the plugin. And let's rejoin the server and let's make sure. Okay, there you go. Now it says create a user. Yeah, so the original problem was that it was trying to insert something for home underscore ID, even though that field did not exist. So it makes sense why it was throwing the error. So if you're running into that error, try just recreating the tables. But yeah, you need to make sure you have all 4 of these columns for the users table. And if you don't, just like I said, just drop everything and then reload the plugin, and it should create the table for you. So we have the record, and of course home ID is null, and that makes sense because we're brand new to the server. So there might be a lot of users that might be playing on your server that might never even use the sethome command, and that's fine. So by default, home ID will be null, but once they use sethome, home ID will no longer be null because we'll create a record for the user home inside the user home table, and then we'll associate that record with the user itself. So that creates the one-to-one relationship. You can see right now, we don't have any records for user home. It's an empty set. So we'll have to go ahead and create a record once the user uses the sethome command. So let's do that. So what we'll do is this. So we're going to go ahead and create a new class for our sethome command. Before we can even do that, we need to go into our plugin.yml file, and we need to actually let Spigot know that the sethome command is in fact a command that exists. Otherwise, if you don't do that, Spigot won't know what that command is. So let's go ahead and on the next line, we'll define our name of the plugin, or the name of the command called sethome. Description, we'll just call this sets the user's home to the current coordinates. We're not gonna have any aliases. The usage will just be /command, and then we'll need a home command to actually let the user go to the home. Teleports the user to their set home usage. There we go. So that should be good. And then what we'll do is we'll just create one class first. So we'll work on the set home command first. So let's create a class. We'll call this set home command. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and implement the command executor interface. And then we'll need to override the onCommand method. Well, we'll need to implement that, okay? So I'll delete this return false statement for now. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and check to see if the instance of command sender is a player. Because in case you didn't know, command sender could either be like the player or the actual console itself. So what I want to do is I want to actually check to see if command sender is an instance of player. So we'll need to import that player entity. Now, if it is an instance of the player, that means we know that it's an actual player that is executing the command and not the console. So what we'll do is we will cast the command sender argument, the instance, to a player. Okay, and we can do that. So let's define a variable called player. So player equals, and then we'll use the cast operator. So parentheses player, and then the target that we want to cast, which is command sender, just like that. And by doing this, I can now reference player, and then I can go ahead and grab all the methods available on a player type. If we don't do this, if I try to do command sender, I won't be able to get any of those things, right? And there's a possibility that command sender is not a player, okay? So you need to make sure you check that first. Of course, you can just do command sender.getPlayer, okay? Like that. But IntelliJ will actually ensure that it will cast it for you. Okay, but anyways, let's continue. So from here, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and query the database for the user's record, okay? So in order to query the database, we of course need to make sure we have the user DAO, okay? And you can see that right over here in the plugin class, we have the DAO defined up over here, okay? So we'll do the same pattern that we did with our event listener. So instead of just creating the user DAO inside the actual set home command class, we'll actually pass it as an argument into its constructor. So the same way that we did it with our event listener class. Okay, so what I'll do is this. We'll actually need both the user DAO as well as the user home DAO. So let me first define another private field, and this will be DAO user home mapped to integer like that, and then we'll call this user home DAO. Okay, and in the constructor of my plugin, we'll do this.user home DAO equals DAO manager create DAO, pass in the connection source, and then pass in user home.class like this. Okay, and now what I'll do is inside set home command, we'll implement two constructors. It's always good practice to implement a no-R constructor. Okay, so we'll implement that, and then we'll implement another constructor with a different signature. And this constructor will take in the user DAO. So DAO user, make sure you import those as well, the classes, and then user DAO like that. We'll set a field private DAO angle brackets user comma integer user DAO, and then in the constructor we'll reference this.user DAO equals user DAO. Okay, And then what we'll do is in our my plugin class, because remember this is the main class. Okay, what we'll do is we'll just pass in that user DAO instance as an argument to the sethome command constructor. So let's go ahead and also register the executor for our sethome command. So we'll call get command. The name of the command is sethome. Call set executor, and then instantiate sethome command class, and then just pass in this user DAO like that. Okay. We'll also need I think we'll also need the user home DAO as well. So let's just set that up so we don't have to worry about that later. Okay, so sethome command will expect two arguments, the user DAO as well as the user home DAO. So I'll just paste this here and just change this to user home DAO, and then user home for the entity. And then we'll just do this dot user home DAO equals user home DAO. Okay, and then in our code we'll pass in. Well, we need to make sure we also, yeah, we have this right over here. Perfect. Okay, so then we'll just pass in this dot user home DAO like that. Okay, there we go. So now in our command, we can actually reference user DAO and user home DAO to interact with those database tables, which is great. Okay, so now what we want to do is we need to query the user. Okay, so to do this, I'll actually go ahead and use the same method that we did in our event listener where we used a prepared statement. So first, let's get the query builder. So we'll go ahead and reference this.user DAO query builder, and this will return an instance of query builder and its user comma integer. Okay, so let's import the query builder class, call it query builder, and we'll set the types user and then integer like that. Okay, and then what we can do is we can reference this query builder to search for the user based on their unique ID. So the same thing that we're doing over here. So I'll just copy this code from my event listener. Okay, so we're referencing query builder, and then we're calling .where, and then we're calling .eq, which just basically allows you to query for the user based on a field in the database. And for us, we're querying it based on their Minecraft unique ID. Okay, so we need to get the unique ID, of course. So I'll just reference player.getUniqueID.toString like that. Okay, and then what we need to do is we need to, of course, wrap everything inside a try catch because it could throw an exception. So let's do that. Okay, and then now over here, make sure you also have prepared query import up top here as well. And then you set the generic type to user, and then prepared query equals query builder.prepare. So this will prepare the statement for you. Okay, so that way you're not writing just raw SQL statements, which is not good. Okay, and then over here we just call this.userDAO.query for first, pass in the prepared query instance. So this will actually query the database for the user, and it'll return the actual entity if found, and if it's not found, it'll return null. So we'll need to go ahead and check if user is null. So now in this situation, we can definitely assume that the user record should always be non-null. And the reason why is because based on our code, right, we are ensuring that whenever a user joins, there's always it's going to create a record for the user if they're a brand new user. Okay, so we can always assume that the user is in fact going to be found in a database. But of course, you always want to check because you never know. So we'll just do this. If user is not null, we'll continue. And if it is, we can just go ahead and do nothing. We'll just say println user was not found. Okay. But based on our onPlayer join event, there will always be a user that will be in fact created if they are brand new to the server and don't have a record. Okay. So if the user is not null, then what that means is we can actually do this. So let's think of it like this, right? There's two situations. the user is using the command for the first time, so that home ID field in the database will be null, as you can see right over here. Okay, so since we have not used the sethome command yet, right, when we use it, home ID will no longer be null. Okay, so if in fact home ID is not null, that means the user has used the sethome command before. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky, but what we need to do is we need to reference user.getHome. Okay, so let me show you how this is going to work. So let me just do system out ln user.getHome. Okay, and let me just go ahead and return true for now. Okay, and let me go ahead and also package our code. Let's make sure we have our executor for sethome set. It is set. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let me reload my plugin. And let's use the sethome method. And now let's look at the console. And you'll see that it says null. And that makes sense because our record does exist in the database for the user, but the user does not have a home set, which is why it is returning null. So what we need to do is we need to check to see if user.getHome is null. Okay. So what I'll do is this. Let's do this. User home equals user.getHome. And what we'll do is if user home is not null, what we'll do is we'll update the user home's coordinates, right? We'll update the X, Y, and Z coordinate. And then we'll actually need to update the database as well, okay? But let's go ahead and handle the case where the user home does not exist, where it's null, right? Where there's no association between the user and the user home record. So if user home is null, we'll go into the else case. And then what we want to do is we want to create an instance of user home. So I'll create an instance. I'll just call this new user home equals new user home. So we'll instantiate the user home. Okay. And then I'll do this. So it's a good thing that earlier we actually created a constructor that took in all three of the coordinates, X, Y, and Z. So instead of having to call each individual setter for set X, set Y, and set Z, we can actually just pass in the coordinates. So how do we get the player's coordinates? Well, it's actually really simple. All we have to do is just reference player, get location, and then call get X for the X coordinate. So the first argument for the user home's constructor is the X coordinate. The second one is the Y coordinate, so we'll call get Y. And remember, the return type of get Y and get X and get Z are all doubles. Okay. Player.get location, get Z, and that should be it. Okay. So this will create a new instance of user home and immediately set the X, Y, and Z field. And let's see. What else do we want to do? I think we also need to set the user property as well. So we'll just do new user home, set user. I actually do not have a set user field. So let me actually do this. Let me generate those getters and setters. So we'll generate it for user. So we'll have a get user and set user. And then now I can do new user home, set user, and we'll pass in the user instance like that. You must do this. Okay. Okay, there we go. And so this will go ahead and create an instance. And now we need to save this instance to the database. So what we're going to do is this. We'll actually just do this.user now, and then we'll go ahead and call update. And actually, I think, I think what we need to do is we actually need to create the user home in the database first before we can actually update the user. So here's what I'll do. We'll do user home DAO.create. We'll pass a new user home. Okay, so let's do this first. Let's package the code. And so we're going to run the sethome command. Okay, and you'll see that in the database, what will happen is it'll create a new record for user home. It'll have the ID of the user, but if you look at the user table, its home ID will still be null. Watch this. Let's test this out. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's go into our database. Let's select from users, home underscore ID is null. Let's select from user home, empty. So let's go ahead and use the sethome command. Let's go into the console. Okay, no errors, good. So let's go ahead and select from the users table. See how I said earlier, home underscore ID is in fact going to be null. But if we look at users home, you'll see that we have our table created and the user ID is set. And that is good, okay? So what we need to do next is we need to update the user so that the home underscore ID field is in fact set. So instead of it being null, we actually have the primary key of the user home record set to the home ID field for the user table. Okay, we must do that. Okay, so after we create the user home into the database, we'll go ahead and reference user and we'll call sethome and we'll pass in new user home like this. Okay, and then all we'll need to do is just reference this.user.dow, call update, and just pass in the user instance like this. And that'll update the user record, and then it'll just update the user's home underscore ID field. Okay, so let me package this. And what will happen is it'll actually create another record, but you'll see that it'll create another record with a primary key of 2, and the home ID will be set to 2. Okay, so let me reload the plugin. Let's go into the database. So select from users. You'll see that the home ID is now set to 2. Let's select from user home. And you'll see that another record was created. Okay, but now this record has exactly one relationship with our user over here. Okay, so that is good. So now we have a one-to-one between the user and the user home. So this coordinate, this record over here belongs to the user of ID 1. Okay, and this is the situation when the user home is in fact not null. So now this situation is when user home is in fact null, which is what happened earlier, right? Our user record did not have any association with a user home, so that's why the user home was null. Okay, but what if it is not null? Okay, so if user home is not null, that means that the user already used the sethome command. They already have a record in the database that is associated with their user record. So all we need to do is actually just update their coordinates instead of creating a new record in the database. So what we're going to do is this. We'll go ahead and reference this. So let me just print out this real quick. User home, get ID. Let me get the ID of that. Let me also make sure that the user is not null as well. Because sometimes with ORMs, you have to double check to ensure that you can actually get the relation. Because sometimes it might be a little bit weird. So let's try this again. So we already have a home record associated with our user. So if I call sethome, it's going to go ahead and execute this logic inside the if statement right over here. So if I look at the console, you'll see that it'll log 2, which is the ID of the home record. And if we look over here, it actually logs null, and that is the get user. So that is a problem, right? Because we cannot get who the user is because the user is null. But we can easily fix that though. We can just simply do this. Here's what I'll do. We don't really need to worry about getting the user because we can just get the user home entity and update the user home record. Okay, so watch this. So we're gonna go ahead and do this. Let's do this. User home dot set coordinates. Okay, and we'll go ahead and get the x, y, and z coordinates. So I'll just copy this and just paste this here because it's the same exact thing. Okay. And then we're not going to update the user property as well because that's going to obviously stay the same. So we'll reference this .userHomeDAO.update, and then we'll pass in user home. So that will update the coordinates. Okay, it will not update the user or the ID, which is what we do not want to update. So let me go ahead and just write a system out print, and I'll just say updated user coordinates. And let's verify that the coordinates are in fact going to be updated. So let's reload the plugin. Okay. And so right now, our record over here, we have our coordinates. Let's move a little bit. Let me press F3. Let's call sethome. Let's go into our console. So the coordinate was in fact updated, but you can see that right now, it actually set the user ID to null, which is not good. So we actually do need to set the user. So let me do this user home.set user. We'll just do user. And that should ensure that the user ID stays the same. Otherwise, we're going to have an issue. Okay, so let's just package this again. Okay, but in the database though, the user record, the users table, the home ID is still set to 2, so it'll still pick this record up over here. So it should be fine. So let's reload the plugin. Call sethome. Okay, and no errors were thrown. If I select from user, nothing was changed for the user. If I select user home, you can see that the user ID is there again, which is good. The coordinates were changed. Well, actually, it wasn't actually changed because we didn't really move. But let's move over here. So right now our coordinates are 76, 88, and 403. So let's just do sethome again. Let's go into our database. You can see that we have negative 76, 88, and 403. And there you go. It is updating the coordinates, and that is exactly the behavior that we need. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to actually make it so that when we use the home command, it will teleport us to those coordinates. So now how do we implement the home command? Well, it's actually not that hard, because all we really need to do is just read the database and get the user's saved coordinates. And if the coordinates are in fact saved to the database, then we'll just teleport the user. So we're pretty much done with the sethome command. Okay, I mean, it would also be nice if we sent a message to the user and say, hey, your coordinates have been set. So I can just simply do something like this, player dot, I guess we can just do send message. And then we'll just say, your coordinates for your home was updated. Okay, and then we'll also do the same thing for here. So if the user is setting their coordinates for the first time, we'll just say you have set your new home. So let me just package this. Let's test it out just to make sure that it works. Your coordinates for your home was updated. Perfect. Okay, and if I were to go into my database, let me delete from user underscore home. I think this should still be okay. Actually, no, it won't, because the user record still has a reference to the home ID. So let me actually just update the user real quick. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing this for myself. Update users where ID equals 1. Set home ID equals to null. Actually, wait. Update users home ID. There we go. Messed up my SQL. Okay, there we go. Wait, what? Wait. Hold on. Wait, what am I doing? Hold on. Let me copy this. Update users set home underscore ID equals null. There we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and test this out again. So let's do set home. And it says you have set your new home. Perfect. So we are hitting both cases. Okay, and if I were to use that command again, your coordinates for your home was updated. Perfect. All right, so now let's exit out of the set home command. Let's go into our code. And let's go into the commands package. Let's create a new Java class. We'll call this the home command class. Okay. And this is going to be the class for the home command. So we'll implement the command executor. And then we will implement the on command method like this. And I'll just return true for now. Okay. And so before we do anything else, we'll also need the same user DAO and user home DAO. So I'll just copy those two over here, and I'll paste it up top here. And IntelliJ will automatically import those the classes for us, which is good. Okay. And then let's go ahead and create a no-arg constructor. And then let's create a constructor that takes in two args, one for user DAO and then one for user home DAO. So pass it in like this. Let's copy this because I'm lazy. We'll just copy and paste everything like that. And then we'll reference this dot user DAO equals user DAO. This dot user home DAO equals user home DAO, like that. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. Before we do anything else, let's go into our plugin class. Let's go ahead and register the executor. So we'll call get command. We'll call home because that's the name of the command, right? That's what we defined in the plugin.yml file. So we'll call set executor, instantiate the home command class, pass in this.user DAO, and then this.user home DAO. Okay, so every single class is always going to get the same exact reference to the user DAO and user home DAO. So we're never creating a new instance of it. Now, I'm not sure if ORM Lite actually uses dependency injection and has a container underneath the hood that manages all of the DAOs that you create. I'm not sure about that. So that's why we're doing it this way. Okay. So let's continue. So what we'll do is inside on command. So when the user uses the home command, here's what we need to do. We need to go ahead and query the user's record in the database. Okay. So we'll do the same exact thing that we did inside sethome and my event listener. We'll query the user by their unique ID. So first, let's go ahead and ensure that the user that is using this command is a player instance. So if command sender, and we'll use the instance of operator to check if it's an instance of player. If it is, we'll go ahead and cast the command sender argument from a command sender to a player. Like this. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll query the database. So we'll need to go ahead and let's go over here. Let me just get the query builder. So I'll just copy and paste that over here. Okay. And like I said, IntelliJ will automatically import those dependencies for you, those classes. Okay. So let's get the query builder and let's just copy and paste these three lines over here. So query builder where equals, and then we need to get the unique ID. We already have the player instance over here, so we just call get unique ID and call toString. Okay, so we're just searching the database for a user based on their unique ID, the Minecraft unique ID. And then we'll just call query builder.prepare, and then we'll reference this.user DAO query for first, and then pass in the prepared query instance. So this will search the database for a user. Now it's also worth creating an additional wrapper class with a bunch of methods, so that way you don't have to copy and paste this over and over again, because it does get really tedious. But don't worry about that for now. I'm just mentioning that in case you might want to consider doing that. Okay, so let's go ahead and print the error if there are any errors. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to go ahead and check to see first. Let's make sure that the user record does exist, because there could be a chance that the user might not be in the database. So let's check that. Okay, so we'll just say system.out.println. So if the user is null, we'll just say user not found. But again, like I said, most of the times the user should be in the database. Okay, so after we check if the user is not null, what we'll do is this. We'll check to see if user's home instance is also not null, right? Because if the user's home instance is null, right? If the user .getHome returns null, that basically means that in the database there is no relationship between the user and the user home table, right? And that typically means that the user never really used the sethome command yet. Okay, so if user.getHome is not null, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and query the database for the user's home, for the user home record, so we can get the coordinates. Okay, if the user's home is null, we'll just send the message to the user. We'll just say player.sendMessage. You have not set a home yet. Use sethome to set a home. To set your home. Let me change from this to that. There we go. Okay, So let me just, before I continue, let me just print out user.get home. So we know that this is going to be defined. So let me try to see if I can reference X. Let me just do this. Let me package everything out. So let's just make sure that we have registered our home command. Perfect, we did. So let's go ahead and use the home command. So we do have a relationship between our user record and the user home record in the database right over here. So let's go into our server. Let's type /home and let's look at the console. Let's see what happens. So let's see. Update user coordinates. Did anything happen? Oh, I did not reload. I always forget to reload the server. There we go. Let's try this again. Okay, so you're seeing right over here it says 0.0, even though that is not the correct value. And the reason why it's giving you 0 is because so here's the thing, right? Even though we have the user record, we can also call get home, but it's not actually going to give us the actual it's not going to give us the actual records from the database, right? This will actually only give you I think this will only give you the home's ID, I think. But I don't think it'll give you the X, Y, and Z coordinate. Let me just verify this. Because I know some of you might be confused why it's not giving you the X, Y, and Z coordinate. But it has something to do with the way the ORM maps these relationships. So we'll have to query it, but that's fine. But let me just show you. So I do /home. You'll see that at least the ID is being logged, which is good. Did I reload it? Yeah, there we go. So let's do /home. There you go. So it's giving you the ID of the home, which is good. So yeah, like by default, I think it won't actually map the relations in ORM Lite. I think there might be a way to actually query the user and get its relations, but I think by default it doesn't do that. But it's fine though. So what we'll do is we'll do this. We'll do user home. So we know that if user.getHome is not null, then that means that there should be a record in the database that exists for the user home. So we'll do user home, user home. We'll reference the user home DAO, and we'll just query. We'll use query for ID because we have the user home's primary key, so we can use query for ID, and then we can just pass in user.getHome.getID like that. Okay, and we should also make sure that we check if user home is not null. Okay, because it could for some reason be null, right? Because like if we delete the record from the database, but we don't update the user's the home ID field, then it's gonna be problematic. So we do need to make sure we check if it's not null. Okay, and of course, if it is in fact null, we'll just say player.sendMessage. You do not have a home set. Use /sethome to set your home. So if the user home record was found in the database by its primary key, then we just need to get the coordinates. So what I'll do is I'll teleport the user. So it's actually really easy to teleport the user. You can just simply do player.teleport. And then there's different signatures for this teleport method. It just depends on how you want to use it. But in our case, we want to teleport the user to a location. So what we'll do is we'll actually create a new instance of location. So make sure you import the location class from bucket. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and do location equals new location. And to instantiate this class, you need to pass in the world and then X, Y, and Z coordinates. So how do we get the world? Well, just reference player.getWorld like that. Okay. And then just pass in the X, Y, and Z coordinates respectively. So we'll do user home.getX, user home.getY, and user home.getZ like this. Okay, and then let me just format this a little bit. Okay, and then now we can just do teleport, or whoops, player.teleport, and then we can just pass in the location like that. So this will teleport player, and we'll just send the message to the player, and we'll just say teleported. Actually, let me use a formatted string. String.format. Teleported to your home. And we can, of course, display the coordinates if we want to. And I'll just do that. Let's do %f, z %f. And let me just do this. So for the x, we'll do user home.getx, user home y, then user home.getz. Okay, there we go. And then we'll just go ahead and call player.send message. And then we'll go ahead and just pass in teleport success message. Okay, so let's go ahead and package our code, our plugin. Let's reload our plugins. And let's test this out. So let's go ahead and move a little bit. Let's do /home and see how it says, see how it teleported us. And it says you have teleported to your home. And then look at the coordinates, -59, 88, 403. And if you look in the database, that is exactly what the coordinates are. Let's move a little bit more over here. Let's set the home over here. We've updated our coordinates. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do /home again. And there we go, we're done. So it is teleporting us to the new place over here. Let's set our home over here. Okay, let's move over here and let's do /home. Teleports us back to where we have set our home. So it's working. That's great. That is perfect. Okay, now let's go ahead and mess around with our database a little bit just to test all of our cases, right? I'm not going to test if the user is null because we already know that the user should be not null. So you don't have to worry about that. But what I will test is if there is no home record in the database. So here's what I'll do. Let me delete from user home. So I'll delete all the records from the user home. There's only one, so I'll just delete that. And let me also update the home ID. So let me actually do this. So we're going to test the case where if the user's home ID property is not null, but the home cannot be found. So that will basically go over here into this else case right over here. Okay, so we don't need to reload our plugin because we aren't changing anything. We just need to reload. We just need to just do /home. So now you can see that it says you do not have a home set. And the reason why that is happening is because, well, our user does have this home ID field populated with number 3. Okay, so that satisfies this if condition over here. Okay, so we are still querying the database to see if the user home does actually exist, right? That's what I said earlier. You need to make sure you query the database to ensure that the record was not actually deleted for whatever reason. Because if it was, then this command won't work, right? And that'll be actually a faulty issue in the system for your code. So we can see that the user home does not exist because we just deleted it. So it will basically search the database. User home will return null because it doesn't exist. So it'll just go into this else case. You do not have a home set. Use sethome to set your home. Okay, not a big deal. Let's go ahead and do that. So even though we already have a home set, but the home record does not exist, it should just automatically update the home ID for us. So let's try that. So let's do /sethome. Your coordinates for your home was updated. Let's select from users. Home ID is 3 still. Let me see if there was a new user home created. Okay, so it seems like it was not created, so we actually have to fix that real quick. Let me just do that before we end the video because I don't want to leave you all hanging. So let's go into our sethome command, and we can see that over here, if user home is not equal to null, but user home was in fact, okay, so user home was not null. Okay, I think I see what the problem here is. So user home is not null because this is user.getHome, right? And we can see that in the database that the value is not null, okay? But over here, so it's executing this if statement, and we're setting the coordinates and we're updating the user, but we're only updating the user, but we're not actually creating the record in the database. So what I'll do additionally is this. So if the user home is not null for the user, actually, I think a better thing to do would be this. Let me actually do this. User home db equals this dot user home now. Let's do this. Let's see. Actually, okay, let's do this. So if user home was not null, we'll search for it in the database to ensure that it actually exists. So user home DAO query for ID. So we'll reference user home get ID. Okay. So if user home DB, if it does exist, okay. So if it's not null, then we can just take this code and execute it there. Okay. So if it does exist, then all we need to do is just update that record. But however, if user home does not exist, okay, then what we need to do is we need to create it, and then we need to also update the user's home ID field, because it has a new it's pointing to a new record that was created in the database. That is why it was not updating the home ID, and it also did not create the record as well. So this will fix it for us. So what we'll do is if user home DB is null, okay, so that means if the record in the database was not found for user home, all we will need to do is, I guess we can just call this again. So let's do this. Well, actually not this, sorry. What we'll do is this. We will go ahead and create a new home. So I think we'll just copy this part, paste this down here, and it'll also reference player.getLocation. Okay. We'll go ahead and reference, we'll do this. This dot user home DAO dot create new user home. We will also need to, well, actually, before we do that, we need to set the user as well. So new user home dot set user, pass in the user record, and then we'll call user dot set home, pass in the new user home, and then we need to update user as well. So this dot user DAO dot update user, and then we'll just go ahead and send a message to the player. Okay, so this should fix that situation. Let's package the plugin. Let's reload it. Okay, so now watch this. Let's go ahead and call set home. Okay, no error was thrown. If I select from users, you can see that the home ID is now 4. If I select from user home, the record is now created, which is good. So let's test this again. Delete from user underscore home. So if I try to use the home command now, it's going to say you do not have a home set, which is exactly what it's supposed to happen. Okay, there's no user homes. Okay, but the user is still pointing to the old record that was deleted from the database. Okay, so if I do /set home, it will now update that home ID to number 5. So that will point to the new user home, which is exactly what we want to do. So we're basically hitting every single case, which is good. Perfect. Okay, so there we go. Let's set our home again. I'm not sure why it was... Wait, I'm not sure why it was... Wait, that's not correct. Hold on. So now it's not updating the record for us. That's not good. I think it is not updating the record. Let me double check this real quick. So let me do this. Let me move a little bit further. So our coordinates in the database should be 38439. Okay, so we just set our home when I do /home. Okay, so it is teleporting us, so I'm not sure what was going on. That is really weird. Let me try this again. Maybe I did it wrong. I'm not sure what's going on. So let me set the home here. Coordinates were updated. Okay, good. I do /set home. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure what that was about. It was being a little bit weird. Good. Perfect. Okay, so let's try this. Delete from user home. /home. So let's do /set home now. Okay, so our coordinates are -4478,469. Okay, so that's good. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe we just did the command wrong, or maybe I'm not sure what's going on, but at least we know that it is working fine. It is teleporting us to the correct place, and that is great. So we have a fully functioning set home and home command. everything works great. And that should be pretty much it. So that is going to be all for this whole tutorial. I know it was pretty long, but we did have to cover a lot of stuff in order to get this to work. But I do hope that you all enjoyed this video and learned a lot from what we just did. If you like this video, definitely leave a like, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you have any suggestions on what kind of Minecraft plugins I should try to make tutorials on, definitely leave your suggestions down below. I'm open to ideas. And yeah, if you need additional help, feel free to join my Discord server. The link is in the description. If you need reference to the code, there will be a link in the description as well to the GitHub repository for this plugin, for this whole entire source code. And you can also just comment down below with issues that you run into. But the best way to get help is join my Discord server. So that is going to be pretty much it for this video. I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.